You there, Chris? Cool, hang on. Chris, are you able to hear those guys? All right, we've had technical issues. Hang on, let me see if I can fix it.
The O-line. Right now, I think you could, I think Vershawn Lee is starting at center. I think Casey Henry is starting at right tackle.
Right.
I think that's set. When they go out there on Friday, I mean, I'd assume Tree Babalade still gets first reps.
Still can't hear, Chris.
Mm-hmm. But as kind of camp progresses, as the season progresses, we know Josiah is going to make his push. At left guard, is it the veteran? Is it Ja'Kai Moore? You know, I think that's a guy who's tried to take ownership of this position group and try to be more of a leader. Does he get the nod day one? Is it, a Kamar Bell, who we saw actually take a lot of first-team reps at some of the guard spots there in spring? Ultimately, the biggest wild card in all this is Marky Anderson, who we've heard since he arrived on campus is a potential future all SEC type guy if he can get healthy and put it all together. Then again, Vershawn Lee, I think he's your starter at center. I think Brubaker would probably be listed as your backup at center, but if he was actually going to miss some time, Torselli would probably be your back. He would be the guy that actually went in. Right guard. Will it be Torselli Simpkins III out there first? Mm-hmm. Will it be Tro Ball, who played obviously a ton for you last year as a true freshman? So you can go through each and every one of those spots and make a case for several guys.
And third time's the charm here. We'll try Chris. So talking about the offensive line leading into camp later on this week, is that kind of maybe at the top of your interest list as far as position groups go, is seeing how it's going to play out over the course of the next month?
Yeah, I mean, guys, I have a lot of interest on the list, but that probably does take the cake, right? I mean, there are so many storylines with this team, including position battles. And some of those battles are more about, backup spots, right? Like, how will carries at running back be divided? It would I would say y'all would probably agree with this, right? It'd be a big surprise if Rocket Sanders isn't the starting running back for this football team. He's a 1,400-yard rusher. Those guys don't grow on trees, but they also have some very capable young players. You know, a new one in Matt Fuller, a returner in DJ Braswell, and then a couple other transfers, and then a Juju McDowell in the mix too. So you have a lot of capable guys. You know, I think if we're looking at, you know, starting battles, that probably takes the cake. That and wide receiver, right? I mean, you have guys on this team that can play multiple spots on the offensive line. And I totally agree with Wes. I mean, Wes and I talked about this off air before the show a little bit about the offensive line. And, you know, Vershawn Lee seems to be the one, I agree, that is locked in the most. I mean, I think what we've heard behind the scenes bears that out. But also, you know, if you're looking for additional evidence, Shane Beamer, one of the last times he spoke about the offensive line, kind of unprompted said it's really great when you have a guy like Vershawn Lee at center. So right there you go. Okay, they're not, you know, for instance, planning on moving Vershawn Lee out to right tackle or left tackle or a guard spot. Like, they seem to think that he needs to be the center, and that makes a lot of sense. He can play other spots from a positional, you know, background. He's played almost every spot, even since he's been at South Carolina. We saw him do that last year in the middle of the season before he also went down with an injury. But that seems to be the one locked in. And I agree, Wes, you just hear so much positive about Casey Henry. The staff's liked him for such a long time. It's just been the injuries. And then you do have the wild card of Marquis Anderson. I mean, it is so hard to find guys like Marquis Anderson with that size and that ability who can move like him. I mean, I remember shortly after he got to South Carolina, they were kind of goofing off before practice on the field, like running routes, and you're out there looking at Marquis Anderson going, I mean, this guy looks like a giant tight end or something out there with just the way he can move. So they have a lot of intriguing pieces. I think they have more options this year. It's just kind of how is it going to play out? And this is one of those instances where preseason camp is really and legitimately going to be huge, determining who the starting five is against Old Dominion. But I also kind of lump receiver into that category. I think there's a lot of intrigue around the receiver position of who will be the starters and who will be the top six, because you have two new transfers even since the spring that are also in that mix.
We'll certainly see what happens. Again, camp getting rolling later on this week. We'll have media days with players and the coaches as well, and then it's off into high gear for the next month, leading up to the kickoff against Old Dominion on August the 31st. But do you have something else to add?
I was just going to ask Chris who the top six at receiver were going to be. I just want him to go ahead and tell us.
Go ahead, Chris. Give us your thorough best depth chart.
Yeah, I would pretend my mic wouldn't work anymore either, Chris.
I'll take that as a no. But and again, we'll have plenty more to talk about camp as the week rolls along. But it was another busy week, and you guys are both out at Shane Beamer's camp on Friday. We'll go back over what happened and what new offers were sent out over the weekend as well. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Monday here on The Game.
All right, guys, if you've been dreaming of that home makeover, or maybe there's just an area of your home that needs an upgrade or maybe even just needs to be fixed, do what we do and hit up our friends over at Midlands Home Renovations. They can specialize in everything from whole home to kitchen to bath transformations. As one of the top-rated general contractors in the Midlands, you can rest assured your home is going to be placed in great hands. From modern kitchens, luxurious baths, that sunroom add-on that you've been dreaming of, they're going to take great care of you and then help take that vision and bring it to life. Easiest way to get in touch with them, head on over to MidlandsHomeRenovations.com where you can get a free quote. There's a button right there when it pops up on the home screen, or you can just call them, 803-868-5651. Again, that's our friends over at Midlands Home Renovations, and they want to take care of any and all of your home needs in terms of taking that vision and bringing it to life over at MidlandsHomeRenovations.com.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you here on the Game On your Monday. Reminder, the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway is back starting today. One winner will get season tickets to all South Carolina home football, baseball, men's and women's basketball games for the upcoming calendar sports year. Register by going to 1075thegame.com and clicking on the Ultimate Season Ticket 2.0 in our media reel. And again, we'll, just like last year, take the three finalists to our summer golf tournament at Charwood in West Columbia next month and announce the winner there. It's all sponsored by our friends at the Men's Clinic at the Irmo Professional Center. On Friday, both you guys were out at Shane Beamer camp. I last checked in with Chris at 11:30 after Wes left here. And Chris, you talked about there was a lot of new names that were out there and guys that you thought might have the ability to pick up some offers from South Carolina. And quite a few names, particularly from the 2027 class, did just that on Friday.
Well, Tyler, if you don't mind, I'm going to actually steer it back towards the 2025 class because there's a guy that Wes and I saw that had everybody's attention, and it's an in-state guy too. Jackson Rep from Christchurch is a guy that was on campus last month at the 7-on-7 tournament, and they made it to the finals, and he was, to use a technical term, cooking people during the 7-on-7, got back out to camp, worked out individually. And Wes, you remember we were out there earlier and we got word that we're like, hey, there's a receiver here today that ran a 4.3 in the 40. And we went, oh, I wonder who that is. And then eventually connected the dots and learned it's Jackson Rep, from Christchurch. And obviously when a kid comes in and already had the background of putting on that strong 7-on-7 performance, already has good game tape from his junior season last year, then comes in and runs a 4.3 twice, and then performs very well in the one-on-one sessions. He had the camp buzzing last week, Wes.
Yeah, he did. And, I think, you said he ran it twice. So a lot of times when a guy runs a time that's just completely off the charts, they'll be like, all right, see if you can do it again. And if you look at his Twitter profile, I think it maybe says 4.3 or something like that in his profile. And he did it twice with a bunch of stopwatches on him, right there in front of the staff. So, this is a kid that we kind of had our eyes on, like Chris said. And the knock right now is just he's not big at all. Like, this is I think listed 5'8", probably in reality 5'7". And when it comes to measurables, it does matter. But we have seen slot receivers at, every level, even you get to the NFL level, when, depending on your offense, if you need a guy who can operate in that short space at the next level, size, in some ways, being a little bit smaller actually can be to your advantage because you're just talking about eating up space in a quick way, but and changing direction, I think. Now, if you look at his film, if you look at what he did in 7-on-7 at the high school level, and then, at the high school level, but against some really talented teams in that 7-on-7 setting, he's making plays down the field as well, and his size really did not seem to be much of a deterrent for him. Now, of course, you're not going up against 6'2" safeties that are 200 pounds and can run like you will in the SEC. So I don't think it's one of those things where it's a no-brainer, hey, just offer this kid. At the same time, I can see how if you're South Carolina, you got to be very, very diligent in continuing to evaluate this guy, not just saying, he's tiny, and deciding if you want to take him. Now, I know, Chris, we've talked quite a bit about South Carolina wanting to get a little bit bigger at receiver. And, they wanted a Malik Clark type. Let's be honest. They did. He was a priority target for them. Would they like a bigger guy? Of course. But if this guy's in your backyard and now I feel like we've seen mounting evidence that he might be a guy you take a flyer on if you're South Carolina.
Yeah, I think this performance this month, it's kind of interesting how it played out, Wes. In the past, all of the camps, there were 9 this year, all 10 of them were in June. It just so happened that this year, because of how the recruiting calendar fell, they stuck one more in on this last weekend of July that coincided with the cookout date. And, that's how it goes in recruiting sometimes where, there was a prospect that I was told was going to go to camp on Friday, this last camp, who's a senior. And if he had gone and performed well, he may have had a really good chance at an offer. He wasn't able to make it. And so it could be that, as fate has it, he may not ever get an offer. Where as if he would have gone to camp, he could have. So for Jackson Rep, if last month at the 7-on-7 had been the end of it, maybe the conversation would just be, man, that's a really good player. And he has, Power 4 offers, like BC's offered him. He doesn't have a huge offer list, but he has options. He may just be a guy that you're looking at a couple years down the road and saying, I might be a transfer portal guy for you. Let's kind of see what happens. Well, now the conversation shifted because you did have one more camp. He showed up for the individual camp. He ran those times. He performed well in those one-on-ones. And you kind of already had a sense of what he was about. You weren't starting from scratch with him, and he's an in-state kid. So, I think that from what I've gathered, that is going to be the discussion. It's not, is he fast enough? Can he catch the football? Is he a competitor? Like, he checks a lot of the boxes, Jackson Rep does. I think the question is going to be, what do you think of the size? Like, is it an issue, when you're talking about making contested catches in traffic? How do you feel like he fits into what you want to do offensively? I think you bring up a great point, Wes, of, in a class that has, frankly, some receivers that are on the smaller size, whether that's height, whether that's frame, do you want to stack another guy who is a little bit more slight in terms of the actual stature, the height? That has to be part of it, right? I know you and I were talking about this. I mean, all those things are very fair questions, but is this a guy that could help you on special teams? Is this a guy that could help you as a slot receiver? I can see it. I don't think it's a stretch to see it. A lot of Gamecock fans on the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central have kind of gone back and said, look, there's been some smaller receivers, or maybe there were some similar questions that have really, really thrived here. I mean, Ace Sanders is one. Obviously, they're not the same type of player. Ace was actually not as straight line fast. He was just super shifty and had incredible football instincts. I think with Jackson Rep, he does have the straight line speed, but he's also quick. He's super competitive. So just a very, very interesting recruitment, and not sure which direction it'll go, but it's definitely fascinating.
Yeah, and I think we can safely say he's at least under consideration, for getting an offer. Like, he's a guy to keep an eye on, or has been. I haven't heard anything today necessarily. And so, Chris, and I do think the Ace Sanders comparison is interesting. Like you said,
yep.
Rep probably a little more straight line, but if you watch his high school film, and you can question the competition, that's fair as well. But the high school film, I mean, he is making plays, and he's making people miss after the catch. And so you got a guy that's got straight line speed, a guy that's got make you miss, has the quickness. What do you think, even big picture, Chris, philosophically, the 105 roster number now? You got more scholarships. Soon you'll have more scholarships to play with.
Yeah.
That would go into my thinking as well, if I'm not just South Carolina, if I'm any team.
Yeah, for sure. And, to back up, there's a question there of how are teams, and obviously for the purposes of our discussion, what will South Carolina do with that? Will they decide, hey, let's kind of go up to, let's stay at basically 85 scholarships and kind of, just basically run a smaller walk-on program with spots 86 through 105? Or will they say we're going to full scholarship everyone? Well, I had somebody tell me, and I haven't totally verified this, but I think it makes sense with the structure we've been told, that you can do partials. You can say 1 through 85 is a head count, meaning, everybody gets a full, and your roster limit's 105. You don't have to give out 105 scholarships. You can if you want to. So you could give out no scholarships. You could give out partial scholarships. You can basically run it however you want. If you wanted to field a team of 105 walk-ons, technically, I think you could. Nobody is going to obviously do that. But it does, wouldn't recommend that strategy. But it does kind of change the equation. There's just so much to consider nowadays in the year 2024 with, honestly, some coaches look at it, and if a guy's on the fringe, they say, well, I mean, let him go to another school, and then we'll look at him in the portal in a year or two, you know. And I'm not saying that's the case with Rep at all. I haven't heard that with him, but it is baked into the thinking. So with the roster flexibility now, you know, sometimes you see guys get flyers taken on them. Sometimes you don't take a flyer because you maybe think you can get him back later.
Like we said, it's a busy week from the standpoint of camp getting rolling on or at the end of the week. It's also a busy week in terms of commitments of guys the Gamecocks have their eyes on. We'll hit on that coming up. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris with you on your Monday on the game.
All right, guys, this episode of the show and every single episode of our show brought to you by our friends over at Firehouse Subs. Almost lunchtime, may be lunchtime for you. Hit up firehousesubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. Hopefully by now, if you've been listening to the show for a while now, you've already got the app downloaded so you can just hit it and then hit the rapid rescue to go. Avoid the wait. By far the easiest, most efficient way to order your lunch from Firehouse Subs. 14 convenient locations all around the Midlands. So no matter where you are in the greater Columbia area, there's going to be a Firehouse Subs near you. So once you hit that rapid rescue, it's going to let you pull up the one closest to you. Then the sandwich is going to be waiting for you on the shelf with the chips in the bag. You just grab it, grab your drink. You're going to be out. Very efficient, awesome lunch from Firehouse Subs. Get your favorite or try my favorite. Brisket, add bacon, still number one on my power rankings. Again, firehousesubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app.
Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Monday. We just talked a little bit about what happened this past weekend out at Shane Beamer Camp and some of the new offers that went out as we keep our eye on recruiting. A very, very big weekend with a couple of huge names set to make their announcements, starting off this Friday with a guy that we've talked about quite a bit on the show in Kendall Daniels, the four-star safety out of Virginia, who has things narrowed down to South Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Clemson.
Yeah, big announcements coming up, and somebody asked me on the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central, they said, how do you feel? How should South Carolina feel? And I was kind of like, man, guys, we've been tracking these recruitments, Chris, for months now. But doesn't it feel like when that finish line is in view, when you're on that home stretch, you got to be really careful in saying that anything is like just solidified. You know what I mean? Like not with every prospect, but sometimes for the most part it's just clear where a guy's going. Other times when you have schools still jockeying for position, you might have some shifts in how the winds are blowing, even just in the final days or hours leading up to what's going on. So, I think for South Carolina, if Chris, we start with Kendall Daniels. Among the three, I think right this exact moment, I maybe feel best about South Carolina's chances there. I think I feel the worst about Jared Smith at this point, but you could also, at any given point this week, you could maybe throw those names in a hat and reshift it around, and maybe that could change. But, I think they have been in a pretty good spot overall with some shifts, again, probably here and there with Kendall Daniels. I know as of late last week, there was still some confidence that the Gamecocks would be the pick for him, and obviously would be a great get for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, and to your point, there's a joke kind of in the recruiting industry among people like us who cover it that, a lot of times when a guy commits, that just kind of jump starts his recruitment, So, I mean, we're seeing that with some guys that South Carolina has had committed, right? Like Shamari Earls. Earls committed early. He seemed all Gamecock. And then all of a sudden, after he commits, there's this – because he wasn't really like – behind the scenes, we knew he was going to commit, but he didn't have like this date set, like this long lead up. So he commits, and the other schools like Michigan and Georgia go, oh, we like Shamari Earls. And they make this huge push, and then Georgia ends up flipping him. Georgia offered Caleb Williams out of South Carolina's class. Don't think they'll flip him as of now. LSU with Jaden Breaker, the linebacker commitment out of Georgia. He went there this past weekend. We've seen the uncommitted guys who do have announcements set, things really, really ramp up. So if a guy is A, committed, or B, is on a clear path to committing, that is when everybody really tightens things up and really makes a huge push. So, there's something I say a lot is that you don't land big-time prospects uncontested. Like these, for Jalen Gilchrist, Maryland and Georgia and all the other schools recruiting him aren't just going to say, looks like he's probably going to go to South Carolina, even when guys commit, Jaden Breaker that I just mentioned, Shamari Earls, they're not just going to give up. And so these recruitments, the three that we've mentioned that are going to be committing soon, a lot of schools have made big pushes, which is expected. And so you have to get to the finish line. It's not, especially in this day and age, it's not just a guy really likes your school and you've been the longtime leader and you're just going to coast to the finish line. That's not how it works.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, Chris, I think let's get a little bit more into Jalen Gilchrist. That's a guy that South Carolina has targeted for. I mean, I think you can go back to this time last year and probably even before that. He's kind of done what I always like to point to when you talk about the full recruiting experience, and that you get a guy in for like a junior day or a spring practice, and then you get him in for, a camp or one of your cookouts. You get him in for multiple game experiences. You get him in at the end of the day for an official. Like he's been on campus a lot. And, I went back. There's some reporting from, I think it was Chad Simmons, this time last summer, saying he was here in South Carolina was the favorite for Jalen. So this is a kid that, again, there are gonna be some ups and downs as it goes along, but for the most part, South Carolina has been considered maybe the team to beat for much of this process. Then, like you said, it tightens up at the end a lot of times. Maryland doing their best to, keep a guy from their major recruiting footprint up there, home, so to speak. So I think South Carolina ultimately should feel okay here, but I don't know that I'm quite ready to claim that yet.
I think the worry that Gamecock fans have is that they look at Gilchrist in particular as kind of drawing a parallel to Malik Clark, where there are encouraging signs, you feel good, but you don't know. You don't know for sure going in. And you also know that there's a school looming and lurking. In Malik Clark's case, it was FSU. For Jalen Gilchrist, it's Maryland. And you just kind of worry of, okay, it's been interesting, Wes, that Gilchrist on social media has kind of queued up this shock the world type of thing, right? And he's tagged Maryland's quarterback commitment from this class in some of those communications. Another joke that we always have is that if a guy says he's going to shock the world, he just typically goes wherever everybody thinks he's going to go. So, I don't know how much we weigh into the whole social media, science of it all. But I do think if you have some concern about Jalen Gilchrist, it's probably well-founded, because you just don't know. Again, there have been some encouraging signs. There's some reasons to feel good if you're South Carolina, but you don't know 100%. And again, you've got to get to that finish line here in the next few days.
Absolutely. And again, we'll see what happens to Kendall Daniels again coming up on Friday, and then Jared Smith and Jalen Gilchrist making their commitments on August the 3rd, which is Saturday. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. I'll get Wes and Chris's thoughts on the greatest moments in Gamecock history since the year 2000. That's next on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Monday. Today starts our greatest moments in Gamecock history since the year 2000. We will have Twitter polls going up each and every day, running through Thursday, with 4 options to vote on each and every day. We'll take the 4 winners, have another poll that comes up the following week, and announce a winner coming up on August the 12th. And this is all brought to you by our friends over at Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. I want to get your guys' take because today's options are the first College World Series title for Gamecock baseball in 2010, the 2 victories over Clemson en route to that title in 2010, Devin Downey's 30-point game against Kentucky, also in 2010, and men's basketball's upset of Duke in 2017. Do you guys have a standout favorite out of that list?
So the first one was the actual national championship?
National championship.
Okay, guys. I mean...
That's hard to beat. I will say.
Some great moments there, but
Yeah.
you're going up against the first team national championship for a men's sport at South Carolina. Also,
Yeah.
it happens to be a sport that South Carolina fans care deeply for. It happens to be a national championship that you did, as we just mentioned, go through Clemson to win.
Right.
And you did it in dramatic fashion to close out Rosenblatt Stadium. So that's got to be the pick.
I agree. I think it's a relatively easy pick. And these are all, by the way, all those moments are great picks. I mean, I remember them all very well. And you go back, I mean, that, not just the Duke upset, like that was arguably the most fun of all of them, just because it was Duke, it was Coach K, like probably not a lot of people picking South Carolina to win that one, but I mean, they ran through some really good teams in that Final Four run. And I mean, how fun was that run? It was absolutely incredible. The Downey game against Kentucky was, I mean, one of the best individual performances I've ever seen. But I agree with your logic there, Wes. Like, because, you know, if it had been 2 wins against Clemson and just, you know, another scenario, I still don't think it would match up, obviously, to the national title. But the fact you can kind of loop those all in. I mean, you win that title in 2010. You know, a lot of it was on the strength of going through Clemson and beating those guys, a very good Clemson team as well. So I definitely pick the 2010 title. Pretty easy pick for me, although all those are great moments.
To no surprise, Clemson, the World Series title, is currently winning with 74% of the vote. So maybe a bit of an easier one out the gate for Monday, but more to come as the week goes along.
Well, what's next? What's second? No, what's second on the list?
What's second on the list?
Yeah.
It is the wins against Clemson, then the upset over Duke, and then Devin Downey's game at 4th.
I honestly thought it would be even more. I thought it'd be like 90%. Maybe. What's the percent on beating Clemson?
13.
Okay, so that's actually splitting the vote a little bit.
Yeah.
Because those are similar.
Right. So
that was that was
the 87%.
Yeah,
all tied up.
That
in
was
that World Series.
the same run,
Right.
basically. So maybe for some people, it's a personal thing. Hope Chris is all right
I
over
say
there.
just get knocked out by something, Chris.
No, I'm good. I guess my mic's pretty good. Just a little.
It is very good.
Be
Just
still.
Just my watch hitting the desk here at the home
It
office.
sounded like
No
Chris
biggie.
fell out, but no. So maybe for some people, we know how personally, like, they take the South Carolina Clemson rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe for some people, just the thrill of knocking out Clemson on the way to winning the title was a little bit more fun than even actually winning the thing. Like, I think winning it, like, and it's probably more of a looking back on it type thing. Like, of course, winning it was amazing, but just to maybe they're kind of semantics a little bit. Like, the whole thing was amazing, but the thing that stands out the most, not just beating Clemson, but being in a spot where you had to beat them twice. And I remember the feeling being like, God, up against the wall here. Like, Clemson has such an opportunity to be able to do exactly what South Carolina ended up doing to them, but they could taste the bragging rights, I feel like, that were coming their way. And, you know, one of these games, you start a guy in Michael Roth who was a situational lefty for South Carolina for the entire season leading up to that point. So I think everything that went into that moment, I can at least see, because it is tied into ultimately winning the title anyway, I can see why that part was pretty special to people. So I do think looping those two things together, though, you've got to run away here pretty easily.
Yeah, I feel like in the future, it'll be interesting to see the data on all these, but I assume a lot of them are going to include some type of victory over Clemson in most of these polls. And I feel like anytime any victory over Clemson, probably in any sport, is mentioned, like, it's going to be a vote getter. You know, that's why, you know, sure, it's still a really big gap in between actually winning the title and beating Clemson. Again, as you said, Wes, within the same run. But even then, like, some people are going to look at it and say, Natty beat Clemson. I still prefer beating Clemson over that. It's just such a, like, you know, it's just an emotional pick. I mean, that's what the rivalry is all about. And I think if you ask Clemson people, they would probably include beating the Gamecocks, you know, in a similar poll that they would have.
Yeah.
So that's our 4 options for today. And again, we'll have 4 more options each day running through Thursday. So 16 total this week that you'll get to vote on to see who moves on to the final 4 coming up next weekend. Again, we announce the winner coming up on August 12th, sponsored by our friends at Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. I imagine, well, there'll be a few more national championship missions in there with basketball and, of course, the other one for baseball as well. But excluding national championships, is there a moment maybe that tops your guys' list that you're kind of, I don't know what's on this list, by the way, so I'm learning it. I'm learning it as the days. I actually don't. So Elijah's the one that's putting this together for the Twitter account. So I actually don't know what's on the list.
So yell at Elijah is what you're saying if he misses something.
If he misses something, yell at him.
I tell you what, guys, I think the baseball national championship, the first one, has a pretty darn good shot of winning this whole thing.
Yep.
Without even knowing what else is on there. Non-national championship, probably for Gamecock fans, you have to look at the men's basketball Final Four is going to do very well, and beating Florida to win the East and go to the SEC championship is going to be way up there as well. Those are the 2 non-national title things that will be finalists.
In 15 seconds, what's yours, Chris? No? Okay. Well, we'll get Chris's answer tomorrow. How about that? That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Go next halftime show, myself and Dimitri Ravanos here on the game.
All right, y'all, before I hand over the mic here, let me tell you about our friends over at Integrated Media. Football season right around the corner, and maybe it is time to upgrade the